you are the face of a very specific niche brand, and you kind of have a social presence on a variety of different platforms: YouTube, Instagram, Spotify. That's all I can think of right now. Um, we're also very good friends, so we've kind of sort of sharpened each other over the years as we've grown as not just videographers and editors, but storytellers as well. Um, and now you're sort of branching off into your own world of freelance and video production. Um, you have a company that you've started up, and amidst all of that, you're also the face of a trilogy of Star Wars fan films about the titular character Cal Kestis, which is what you've sort of developed your brand around is the character of Cal Kestis. And you've got these 3 films under your belt. The third one coming out in May, which is also your directorial debut. So all that said, video is kind of your thing, and you're also a big proponent of the Star Wars franchise. And so I guess the best way to open up this conversation is we're already well aware of each other's stories, but for the sake of the guy who represents the younger versions of ourselves, or at least the guy that likes the concept of telling stories and likes the concept of getting into video editing and freelance, let's talk about how we got to where we are today. What got you into videography, and what sort of immersed you into that industry, that world?
Yeah, I mean, every kid has a YouTube channel at some point. So I had a channel, when I was little, and actually in middle school I would do little tech deck videos. I can still shred on a tech deck, by the way. That's like riding a bike. That doesn't go away. I did little drawing tutorials on it and that kind of stuff, and just kind of fell away, got bored with it, and moved on. And then COVID hit, and you just have a enormous amount of time to fill during something like that, and so started another YouTube channel, and it was called The Art of the Force. That's trademarked, so I know y'all want that channel name so bad, but you can't have it. Yeah, and it was more drawing videos, tutorials, time lapses, that kind of stuff, and then had that channel kind of on the back burner, wasn't super committed to it or anything. And then you, Zach, started toying with the idea of making Star Wars fan films. And, when you have a ginger in your pocket, it's easy to just, convert to Cal Kestis. And
you really only have one option.
Yeah. And so, Jedi Fallen Order had pretty much just come out, I think, a year before. I think, 2020 was COVID. So, that's pretty much when that became a thing, and it was probably a combination of just like always enjoying showing my art to people, whether it was my drawings or my tech deck fills or anything like that. I liked creating things and then showing them to people and watching how people interacted with them.
Breaking into the film industry feels impossible. Every aspiring filmmaker knows the struggle. Years of passion, countless hours studying cinema, and yet no clear path forward. The industry feels like a locked door and no one is giving you the key. I know that feeling because I've lived it. I grew up captivated by Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Pulp Fiction, Taxi Driver, so on and so forth. I went to film school expecting to walk out with connections and career opportunities. Instead, I graduated with 0 leads and a sinking feeling that my dream was slipping away. Everything changed when I uncovered the key lessons every successful filmmaker eventually learns, but no one is talking about. These lessons aren't found in film school or industry gatekeeping blogs. They came from real filmmakers doing the work, people who have found ways to break in, build careers, and make films outside the Hollywood machine. That's why I created my podcast, interviewing filmmakers from Bradenton and Sarasota who have actually made it happen. They're working, thriving, and proving that a career in the filmmaking industry is possible. Now I'm inviting you behind the scenes. Join my Patreon and get exclusive, unfiltered access to the knowledge and insights that can help you forge your own filmmaking path. Full-length, uncut podcast interviews are available with working filmmakers sharing their real experiences, struggles, and successes. There's going to be in-depth critiques where I break down storytelling, cinematography, and filmmaking techniques in some of my favorite films. There's going to be behind-the-scenes updates on my book, The Lodestar Manifest. There's also going to be a 7-day free trial for anybody who wants to try my Patreon out. There's also opportunities to explore an exclusive one-on-one collaboration with myself where I'll personally watch your film or read your script and give you practical, actionable feedback to elevate your work. If you're serious about filmmaking, this is where you start. Join now and let's create old stories today. Go to patreon.com/Zach Golden.
And so, yeah, that and the combination of the foretelling and really kind of stepping into what that world looks like, you know, being on a set, you know, even something like a fan film or, you know, like us just being Star Wars buddies and getting together and, you know, you casting me in your project, it just kind of opened up my eyes for this field. And, you know, of course, always loved movies and that kind of stuff. But I think that was really it, was just like getting to witness everything and the detail and the craftsmanship that goes into that kind of stuff. I think that's what kind of drew me in.
Would you say films played a part in your growth as a video producer? Like, what if there were films, like which ones were they, or would you say just as a whole that films weren't really that involved in your upbringing?
No, I mean, you know, I've been watching Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, you know, all those movies, you know, since I was very little. And, you know, I'm obsessed with Star Wars, and like to this day, like my channel is about Star Wars. Pretty much everything that I choose to be a part of today dates back to my initial love of something. And with videography, it's probably movies.
Yeah. How much would you say, you know, movies like, if we go back to Spider-Man and Indiana Jones, can you point to something within those movies that says, I am the kind of videographer I am today because of Spider-Man or because of Indiana Jones?
Well, so Raiders of the Lost Ark is my favorite indie movie, and probably I think it's my second favorite movie of all time. I have a list somewhere on my phone. But I think it's number 2 behind Empire Strikes Back. And something that I've always really enjoyed about the Indiana Jones cinematography from like the direction of Spielberg is his use of shadows and lighting. There's a scene in Raiders when Marion is, you know, doing the drinking contest and Indy comes to visit, and after the bar is all cleared out. And Indy walks in, and you don't even... It's the beginning of the icon of Indiana Jones, and specifically the hat. Like, you walk in, and the reason why the hat is so attached to Indiana Jones and Harrison Ford is because Spielberg wants it to be, and it becomes his silhouette. And we've talked about this and, you know, how important character silhouettes are, and you've kind of trained me up on that. But that's... you know, that's the shot that I think of when I think of Raiders, is the shadow of Indy coming in, and then, you know, as he leaves the bar, this shot to me just it makes me make a noise when I see it. I go, because it seems like it's so perfect that it has to be an accident that they rolled with. But when Indy leaves the bar, there's like, he closes the door and you see just this diamond shape over his eye. The rest of him is dark, but you just see the eye, and that one eye is all you need to read the emotion of the end of that conversation. Before the Nazis come in and they shoot up the bar, and Indy, you know, beats some guys up, and Marion's breaking glasses on, you know, people's heads and all that.
Amidst all that facade, there's a light in his eyes. That,
yeah.
You know, yeah.
Well, and like that conversation too is all about, like, you know, I was a child and you knew it, and just the regret of a past life. And I don't know, that's one of the reasons I love Indiana Jones as a character, is just because on the surface, it's fun adventures and it's awesome action set pieces, but he's deeper than that, and he's kind of a character that had a really horrible childhood and had to adapt and overcome. And I think that's Indy's signature trait is adaptability. He can get himself out of any situation. But anyways, that's a whole tangent. The reason I brought that up is just because those were I was watching Raiders and Indy before I was a Star Wars fan, and it
was like your first exposure to the power of lighting and shadow.
Yes, it was the first time where I, at least that I can remember, the earliest I can remember, being impressed by the technicality of a movie being made, and so I attribute a lot of my interest in that to like George Lucas's early stuff, Spielberg's early stuff, because that's where my childhood is, but it's also like where the legends are born,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So you grew up watching these movies the same way I did, and you enter high school, you have the high school experience, and you're trying new things, and you're figuring out what you like and you don't like, and then you get a formal education in this field. Tell me about what that's been like, how that's going.
Yeah, so I started going, so let me back up. I went to public high school, and during COVID, actually, there was something called a hybrid program, which in order to separate, excuse me, this coffee's making me burp. In order to separate, like people and limit social interactions and stuff, because of the pandemic and all that, you basically had like a couple days that you would spend actually in school and a couple days you would spend out of school, and the teachers would supply you with work that you could do at home, basically like a whole day of homework. And what drove me crazy with that was the hybrid days, where I wasn't in a school setting. I realized how much faster I could get school done and still have like good grades and learn what I needed to learn to graduate. And so
you got the taste of the homeschool life.
It made my junior and senior year, well, my junior year flew by because of it, but it made my senior year super slow because that wasn't around anymore. We were back in schools, all that stuff. And it just felt like such a drag because I was in class all day, after getting that exposure to, I didn't need to be in class all day. And so that started my like kind of, not hate, but like distaste for schooling. Mm-hmm. And then living at home, my parents were like, you got to do something. You can do anything you want, but you got to have a plan because you can't stay here forever. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went to community college and tried to figure that out. Failed a bunch of classes, wasted time, wasted money. But what I did learn in the middle of all that is the videography thing. I did learn what I wanted to do through that failure, because that's when we made the foretelling and stuff like that. And I had what that did for me was give me something I knew I didn't like, instead of just going and being like, well, what do I like? It's, if you don't know what you like, if you don't know what you're passionate about, just start doing something, you'll figure it out. Process of elimination.
Speak more into that. That's an interesting concept.
Yeah. So, yeah, kind of continuing with that story, because it kind of plays into that a little bit. Is after that, ended up I was working at Publix for a time, which is like a supermarket chain in the southeast of the U.S. for those that don't know, and it was, kind of a really long like comma on my life, just really dragged out progress and all that kind of stuff, because you're stuck in like this grocery clerk job. And
I was right there with you.
Yeah,
it's not fun.
It's I mean, the people were nice and stuff, and there is room to grow there, to climb that, that ladder. But do you want to climb that ladder? And that was the question I was faced with was, do I want to work at Publix the rest of my life? And so started dabbling with YouTube, in that area and kind of figuring things out. And then last year decided to go to a trade school, take a digital video production course, and try to get some schooling on this. And I felt pretty comfortable with my knowledge previously. At this point in time, I'm already working in the field, post foretelling, post Kestis, working in the video field, doing work for West Braden Baptist Church, church I attend, and different ministry opportunities there with video. But not like full time, not like I'm ready to move out and live on my own. And so I was like, let's go to school for a bit, see if I can learn anything. And I did. And going through all that, I did learn a lot of stuff. But not so much because of the actual curriculum of the course or let me just put it this way. It was more so being in the right headspace at the right time where I feel like I learned the most in that course. The course cost like $5,000, and half of that goes towards your tuition. The other half goes towards a lab fee. And that lab fee goes towards a bunch of gear that we use to make projects with, to get graded on. And you get to keep that gear. That was the main thing that sold me, was we're paying, and then on top of that, like, we're the half of that money that we're paying, which is like, $5,000's not a lot, or not a small amount of money, is going towards gear that we can use and continue to like make that money back over time. So that was a big thing for me, and that was what made me decide to do it. Now the reason I say that like the curriculum and stuff kind of sets you up to fail is because there's not near enough of it, and it's not near challenging enough. And on top of that, I love the instructor I had. She's an awesome lady, but she didn't like movies. And so that kind of creates a weird area for someone that got into video because they liked movies.
And we've talked about this. It's such a interesting dynamic, being someone who doesn't, because just me being who I am, I love telling stories and I love video production. So naturally there's going to be this very fluid blend of those two worlds, being someone who loves film and the process of filmmaking and getting into that whole world. And so like, of course I'm going to be watching films and studying and just like consuming movies. And then you are not on the other end of the spectrum. You're kind of dabbling more into freelance, video production, video editing. But even you, we just talked about how you learned to appreciate the power of lighting and shadow because of cinema.
Right.
So it's interesting to see a professor teaching digital media and not having that appreciation for film.
Yeah, and it really did, Miss Abby, if you're listening to this, okay, I love you, you're awesome. But I'm gonna be honest here. It did create some complications, I think, with some students that were going into this course on ground zero. Like I said before, I was already making stuff, making money doing this, and so I kind of had like a base level of knowledge going in. There's other kids in that class that really could have benefited from maybe a more film-driven, just more film-driven learning experience.
Well, it's like, what is the standard by which you should be shooting content for? Like what's in the back of your mind as like, what does an objectively good-looking shot look like? What are you gonna measure it up against? What's the metric?
And we watched videos, which is fine, but when you're paying $5,000, you want to have someone actually teach you in person, take the time. And I just don't know if the course or the instructor really had the know-how to teach someone to do that, which kind of sucks, if I'm being real, because it doesn't. I can watch videos for free on YouTube, You know, like I don't want to pay money to do the same thing that, you know, I could do at home for free. But leaning into that why film is like a good standard and stuff is because you and Rachel talked about this on the last episode, or whatever episode that was, where you were talking about how like a film set is a microcosm of life experiences, and how, you know, everybody has their role and everybody does their thing, and it's equally important, and it teaches you a lot about teamwork and, you know, working hard, and because, you know, long days and everything's detail driven and all that kind of stuff. And everything that we did in the class was very commercial based, and Miss Abby had a more broadcasting like background. Like she worked for ABC7 for a little bit, and that's awesome knowledge, and she has a good relationship with people that work at ABC7, but it's not, you know, what everybody wants to do. Like if you wanted to be a broadcaster, of course it would be great. If you didn't want to be a broadcaster, you're kind of only scratching the surface, you know, for $5,000, which isn't that satisfying. But anyways, where I felt like I grew, because I don't feel like the course is a complete waste of money, and I'm only speaking about a specific course. Of course, this varies on your instructor and the school and all that kind of stuff, but I think this advice applies to every trade video course or whatever. If you go in with the mindset of, I'm going to teach myself these things with the assistance of the instructor or with the teacher, instead of going in, the instructor is going to teach me everything I need to know, I think you'll be more successful. Because it puts you in the mindset of, I'm my own boss, I determine my success, and I'm not going to blame anybody else if I don't get to that point. Like, I'm not going to blame my instructor for not liking movies because she doesn't like movies. It's up for debate, you know, why she's teaching the course.
I don't, you know, deny her qualifications. It's a point of interest. It's like, oh, okay, like this is the approach she's going to be coming from, but I shouldn't deny myself the knowledge and experience that I could gain by being like, oh, well, she's not interested in film, therefore I took this whole class and didn't learn a whole lot because none of it was filmic in nature.
Right.
That's such a, you know, weak attitude to have. So that's really cool. That's interesting.
Yeah, that and I think where the class helped me the most was having a slotted time because it was 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. every weekday. You know, so for 5 days a week, you know, that's a lot of time. And what it really did was create a funnel for me to work on my craft every day. No distractions. You're driving to this place. It was about a 30-minute drive for me, so I had to be intentional about going out there. And on top of that, like, you don't want to miss days. You paid for them, and your attendance is a part of your grade. So, like, you got to be there. And there were kids in that class that would kind of, you know, waste time all day, kind of like in a public school. And there were kids that would work really hard. And the kids that worked really hard will have the success. Even though they don't have maybe the knowledge, like the skills will develop over time because they have that mindset. And that's where I think I learned the most in that class was how important like time management is, and having that slotted time to work on my craft. Because I was allowed to work on, you know, professional things, my YouTube stuff in there, and I could even submit that stuff for extra credit. So like she was very accepting of, you know, turning in all that kind of stuff. But yeah, to sum things up, that's probably my schooling experience, you know.
Yeah. So you're going to school with a class of students. I imagine you're seeing the same faces with each of these different courses that you're taking over the period that you're at this school. And, you know, you work on projects together, and, you know, maybe one of you is sort of overseeing the whole project, or maybe it's more of a collaborative effort. How do you, as a videographer with your own set of eyes, your own tool sets, your own agenda, really, how do you collaborate with other videographers who are going in with the same dynamic? They have their own set of eyes. They have their own goals and agendas. They have their own strengths and weaknesses. How do you collaborate with another videographer as a videographer yourself?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that comes down to compromise. Everybody leaves happy at the end of the day. Figure out a way to achieve that. We talked a little bit about kind of producing my own first short film and all that kind of stuff, and learned a lot with that process as well. But I'm gonna use that to answer a question. Answer your question was the person I brought on to direct Checkpoint, a Jedi Survivor story is what it's called. His name's Dylan Aguiar, and Dylan is such an amazing creator. So I hit it off with him right off the start because he was really into movies and really into the movies that I like. I like a lot of stuff from the 80s and 90s, I found. And, that's when he was growing up. So it was just perfect. We got along really well. And on top of that, he was his background for joining that course was he was a professional photographer, had a really good eye, took great photos, but didn't really know anything about video. And so he wanted to take the video course to expand his business and all that kind of stuff. So I got to know him really well, and I was like, you know what, we're going to make this short film together, and Dylan, I want you to be my director, and I trust your eye, I trust your vision. And it was really good. Like, we got the script writing done, he agreed. He wasn't he likes Star Wars, everybody kind of has that base liking of Star Wars, but he wasn't as sweaty like us, and so I was kind of the lore master of the script and, making sure that things worked. But he was more of he was the director. So, the way that the film looks kind of lies more on him than it does on me. And we kind of did butt heads a little bit during that pre-production because he kind of wanted to do something different than I wanted to do. But at the end of the day, it's like, my goal was as long as it feels like Star Wars. And having been on, your sets for Foretelling and Kestis and a couple other projects here and there, I kind of had an idea on how, these things should look and how they should run and all that kind of stuff. Of course, Checkpoint was my first time really implementing a lot of that stuff. So I took a lot of those practices in, and really it was just kind of like keeping things fun, keeping things light. There's no need for anybody to get mad at anybody. And Checkpoint was a little bit of a stressful thing for me because it was my first step into that. And then on top of that, it was shot while the sun was rising. We had a time slot that we wanted to meet, and it was important for the story, but also the visuals. I wanted it to be visually beautiful. But there's symbolism in Checkpoint about the movie happening as the sun is rising. And that created some complications as well because it was like a mile walk out to that beach, and then, we had, what was it, from 7 o'clock to
some ungodly hour.
Yeah, it was like 6:30, 7 a.m. to shoot to, I don't know, pretty much 9, and that was our window. And so there was there was a lot of management going on there. But I guess to answer working with other videographers that kind of have their own vision and their own goals is you kind of just have to sit down and you have to talk it out with them. I will work with Dylan, in future things because we talked about this kind of stuff and our kind of complications with each other's visions and that kind of stuff. Because I think that the writer and director should be pretty close on the same page. But we talked it out. We were like, this is what we want to do, and this is what I want, and this is what you want. And you just kind of figure it out. As long as you're both level-headed, nice, normal people.
Reasonable human beings.
You'll be okay. Don't go in expecting, especially if you hire someone else as your director or someone else as your producer, don't go in expecting oh, this is my project, so it's going to go exactly how I want it to go. because
That's dangerous.
what did you hire that person for? Like you hired them to support your vision, or you are hired to support their vision. So you need to work. I mean, it's basic human skills. You just need to work together, figure it out, talk it through, have a plan, because when you're out and on a shoot or like a limited time shoot, like things get messy. Like no matter how well you plan, like it just happens. I mean, you were operating BD1 for Checkpoint, and his head just popped off.
Popped right off.
So, which had never happened while I was building the puppet. And so, like, it's how do we figure that out? And it's everyone keeping a cool head and adapting and, figuring it out. So
We're going to talk about Checkpoint. We're also going to talk about the problem graduate students don't expect to face after graduating from studies in videography and digital media. We're going to get into all of that, but first we're going to cut the tape because it's Patreon members from here on out. I want to thank Wesley Hamilton, Rachel DeBicaro, Felix Arroyo, Vegas VR, Kangdrew Lee, and Andrew White for being part of the Gen 1 family and supporting me on Patreon. Thank you guys. And yep, this has been The Golden Hours with Zach Golden. That's a wrap on YouTube and Spotify. And cut.